So again, to look at this a bit more, I'm going to motion tween these now to give you a better idea about what should be happening. Now this is obviously more of a moonwalk effect, but you get the idea. So it does seem that the right foot is like a little bit crossing the guideline, and then when we get to here, it's not quite doing the same thing. It was sliding up a little bit, so let's pull that back. I also want to pull this in for some reason until it feels a little more natural. It was slightly different from this, but nothing horrendous. I think that should be alright. So we're getting a little closer to where we could be. I haven't used scale yet, and again, scaling and skewing, these are things that I don't like to use until I like shape tweening, until you absolutely have to, because again they do result in fairly powerful deformations of the geometry of the different symbols. So only use them when you have to. Not that you can't use them, but just be warned. So here's the basic moonwalk effect. Now again, to look at the character, bear in mind there's counterpose going to be happening with the character. I'm going to go back into this to illustrate that phenomenon. Counterpose is the principle where the hips and the shoulders move at opposite angles, and this is nature's way of balancing your body so you don't fall over every time you pick up a can of beer. So the right hip, in the case of this, because I've followed we're moving forward with the right, should be lower, and the right arm should be higher. And this is where things can get very confusing very quickly, but we just want to bear in mind that this shoulder here should be higher than this one here, so we're okay to tilt that down a little bit. And the opposite with the blue, we can bring that up as far as the rig will allow. We do have some limitations in this program. So let's move this down a bit, and don't forget to do the same for the second instance of this contact pose, so we cycle properly. Any change you make here has to be duplicated here. Quick note too, before I go any further, there are two kinds of motion tweens. The one that I did here, where you select your frames and you go motion. There's another kind which is useful but dangerous, and that's motion tweening from here. And you can create motion tweens here by doing this. What happens when you do that is that these frames become synchronized to one another. What this means is that all the symbols, all the instances that are here will take their state from the first frame. That means you can't swap them out. It means you can't change these numbers individually, which sometimes you might want to do. I've also found it can slow down your frame rate quite horrendously. So only use that for specific times when you need that feature. Don't use it otherwise. You can switch it on and off by using this sync button. So if I want to make this sync, then I'll do this, and now you see that black line is gone, meaning these frames are now one symbol and one state of frame all throughout this. So I would, like I said, just don't do that. Always get into the habit of motion tweening from here, from the properties panel, unless you absolutely need the sync feature. And there are times, for example, when you do dialogue, where you might want to do that. More on that later in other lessons. So anyway, sorry, back to this. So we have first contact pose, second contact pose, and I'm going to let this go. So we've got now the second keyframe that I usually do is the recoil position. And to go back to the static references here, the recoil position is when we make full contact with the ground and the back leg lifts from the ground. I like this because it's it'll determine how much weight the character has. If the recoil is light and he only comes down a small amount, then he's pretty easy on his feet. If you really want to make it a more bouncy walk, then this is the real frame is going to determine it, and all the arcs that follow from it. So let's do the recoils. Now also, the reason why the feet are going to be smooth through this is because we're not going to mess with the positions too badly. We're going to let the positions of the feet be determined by this. These feet are, whatever their faults, their horizontal position is motion tweened by the program, and it's perfect. So we don't want to make any changes halfway through. Once we determine, okay, that's the recoil position and that's the recoil position, then that's it. If you want to make a change when you do the walk cycle later, you could cause problems. So it's much easier if you're happy with this timing, and this is a fairly standard timing. There's not going to be anything horrendously wrong with it. So for the moment, to make this easier, I'm just going to switch off the legs, and that way we can just see the feet, so you can see exactly what's happening. So we're going to go into the, let's put this on also like 100%, so we can make consistent changes with the by nudging the elements around. So this foot here, as it does on the other, it's going to hit the ground. I'm not going to move the foot. I'm just going to rotate the foot so that its position is. I'm going to take that back. I'm going to see if I can move it back a little bit. This is the only point where I can really play with the horizontal position of the foot, and hopefully this won't cause too many problems. It should be more or less beneath the character's central axis of weight. I didn't like the position when it was put here, as if you can imagine the character, he's leaning too far back. So I use shift and the numeric arrow keys to move him 2 shots that way. That way I can completely control it. So then we have the back foot, which is going to lift off the ground, and the upper body is going to fall down. I'm going to use again shift key and the arrow key to move it down by I think it's 10 pixels. It's a fixed unit. It's very useful. So we duplicate the same process on the second recoil position. This time it's this foot coming down and the green or the right foot coming off the ground like this. So now if we play through, you see the walk is beginning to look less of a moonwalk and more of a proper walk. Now, although there are 4 positions in a walk cycle: contact, recoil, passing, high point, contact, recoil, passing again, and high point, I find that you can really get away without using having to keyframe in a passing position. You can just do a high point, which is really great. It simplifies it. Then Flash can motion between a lot of the business here. You can go in and certainly set the arcs, but this is for our purposes, at least right now, we can dispense with this and go straight to the high point. And in any event, we would do the high point next. So let's find the position of the high point, and where we place it, it's going to determine how much weight the character has. If I put the high point, let's say here, then the character's taking all these frames to get off the ground from the recoil position. That's going to make him feel heavy. And if you do it somewhere in the middle, he'll feel more average. If you were to put the high point here, it would make him feel floatier, like he's up in the air, slowing out of the high point before he slams into the ground. So your position, your keyframe, once you choose it, is going to set quite a bit of the character's weight. Not so much his character, but certainly his mass. So let's just put it somewhere, again, fairly standard. I'm just going to put it there. And we want to make sure that when we determine the second high point, it's exactly the same here. Oops, clear key, clear that, put the keys in. So 1, 2, 3 blanks, 1, 2, 3. So now the high point, just to go back to the reference, is and the one we're going to do is this frame here, and this is when the leading leg is at its highest point as well as his head, although his back leg will still be more or less contacting the ground. And this is the energy here on this leg. This will be important later, that we this has the most kinetic energy, I guess, and the strongest line of action in the entire walk cycle. So I cannot really alter the position of this foot because it's been determined by my contacts. So what we can do, and what we do have control over, is the height that the character walks to. So I'm holding on the shift key and nudging him up 3 times with the arrow. Same thing on the other high point. So now when we walk, you'll see, just look at the body, ignore the feet for now. The body's already looking like a proper walk cycle. And so it's, you know, the foot is tending to slide a little bit too far up, so I'm going to flatten it. And we have a lot of freedom with this foot. We can move it up if you want them to look more like a goose step, or drag the foot, whatever's most natural. At the scene here that we were looking at, he's dragging a little bit, probably a little more natural that way. Let's try that. And I'm not going to move it left or right, I'm just going to let the program itself determine that. And now we duplicate the same process here. So the rear foot, you know, needs to be flattened out just a little bit, and then the leading one, hopefully to match, and so the high point on the left side and the right side are fairly similar, and that is important. We don't want these to be a tangent ugly, so that might hopefully look okay. So let's see if that works. And now we have a walk. The next thing to do will be to do the legs, and that's where we get into a nested animation where the symbols for the legs will have an internal timeline. They're a comp, they're their internal clip. And in the next part of this, I will show you how we do that.